Gammetta. For the people, by the people.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
And very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Live. My guest tonight is Mr. Raj Prabu, who is a senior research analyst at Verite Research. Very good evening and very warm welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming. Now, obviously, everyone's either talking about or misinformed or underinformed, but would like to know about this IMF program. Is it simple to say that it's all done and dusted, it's in the bag, and Sri Lanka is not bankrupt anymore, and so on? Or is that a bit simplistic?
I think that's a bit too simplistic. So just to give a bit of background, Sri Lanka has been in 16 IMF programs in the past. And Sri Lanka has only completed 9 of them. So in other words, from periods 1965 to 2019, Sri Lanka was in an IMF program 50% of the time, which means that Sri Lanka has constantly gone to the IMF, and this is our 17th time. And we are far ahead, we are far away from our recovery. We are on the path, but we are still in the initial stages of recovery. And getting the IMF board level agreement and the program is one crucial step. But there is a lot more steps in the path that we need to complete, like debt restructuring and all of that. So this program sets the foundation or sets us in the path of that recovery, but we still have to achieve or complete a lot of other targets and hurdles before we can say that, oh, we are out of the debt crisis.
And what is the whole purpose of this IMF program? What is it? Is it just merely a handout, or can you explain it simply so that we, the public, will understand? Why the IMF?
So the IMF program is technically designed because we need, Sri Lanka needs to get out of the crisis, and Sri Lanka needs to take a lot of policy actions and address structural imbalances in the country. So the IMF, the goal of the IMF program is to address structural imbalances and ensure that Sri Lanka is a path of recovery after all of this crisis. So in summary, that's what the program is supposed to achieve.
Right. So it's not merely a handout.
It is not merely a handout. There are a lot of commitments attached to the handout.
And these commitments, they must be having some concerns. So what are the main concerns then?
So I think the biggest concern that we have on the IMF program is the lack of published analysis, lack of published rationales behind the IMF program in itself or the commitments in itself. So there are 3 main concerns. There are 3 examples that I would like to highlight that explains why the lack of analysis or lack of published analysis is a problem. One is on withholding tax. So the IMF program dictates that withholding tax needs to be brought back at 5%. And personal income tax can go up to 36%. And that was done and that was completed. But when you look at the numbers, withholding tax alone, if we bring it to 10%, so from 5 to 10%, you can collect an additional 90 billion more. We have done the math and the analysis is public. But with personal income tax, the whole of personal income tax only collects 100 billion. So now the question is, why can we not increase withholding tax to 10% or even above? Because what it does is it not only gives you additional revenue, it also encourages people to file income taxes because you can claim it back because you're paying a higher tax. Because now when you're paying a 5%, people tend not to file income taxes. So then the question, so that's...
Then what would then happen to personal income tax?
So personal income taxes could remain, or you could almost eradicate personal income taxes if you bring withholding tax to 10%. You see the counter narrative that, there could be senior citizens who rely alone on interest income and charging a high tax on them is unfair, but you can systematically avoid you can systematically exclude senior citizens from withholding tax, and there are measures that you can do it. The other example is on cigarette taxation. And that, so Verite has been constantly publishing a lot of analysis on this, but the budget for 2023 announced that we are going to collect 140 billion in excise taxes. And in order to do that, the IMF program says a 20% increase on excise taxes was due, and we did that in January. When you look at the numbers and when you do the math, that 20% is only going to bring you 92 billion in revenue. And again, there's another commitment to review and maybe increase excise taxes in June. So let's say we do that again, we do another 20% increase in June, that'll bring you to 99 billion. You're still going to fall short by 40 billion from your budgeted revenue targets.
Right, and why is that? Is that because some government lackey is making some money out there?
So I think it's also because there is no public information as to why the 20% is the ideal rate increase. So as soon as the budget was announced, Verite published and said taxes need to go up by 147% in order to achieve the budgeted revenue of 140 billion. But so far, we've only seen a 20% increase.
Is this only on cigarettes?
This is on cigarettes and alcohol. But the 140 billion is purely from cigarettes.
Okay. So, but we have various reports about the implementation of this. We are told that you can't have excise license, renewed, for example, if you've got any outstandings. And after all, this is largely a cash business, and there's a lot of cash going around. So there's no excuse for manufacturers to actually pay this. So is this something that Verite is researching, and has it been highlighted? So
we've constantly highlighted the need to increase, and what our recommendation is to make the taxation policy transparent. You can introduce a formula, and there's a lot of work that's published not just by Verite but also by IPS and many universities who've said you can index it to inflation, you can index it to GDP, and make this formula part of a law and say this is the formula that's used to tax cigarettes.
What about people who owe money but are continuing to manufacture? That means the people are being done in.
Yes, so that's another problem where income tax collection in itself is a concern.
But this is excise collection.
This is excise collection. But I think with excise collection, the focus is on why is the 20% increase the right number? Because we haven't seen any published analysis that says 20% is the right number. And we have published.
So what you're really saying is that the numbers say that if you want to collect 140 billion from cigarette taxes, you need to increase the tax by
147%.
147%. The cigarettes are already 2,000 rupees a pack. So another 100% is 3,000 or 4,000, which is 2,000 now. So 100% is another 2,000. And half of that again is about 500
bucks.
Or 1,000. So this is a pack of cigarettes, according to that, could be what, 5,000?
Potentially, but then the question is, how did the budget come up with the number of 140 billion? These are government published numbers.
Right, so nobody's explained that. Who's the Minister of Finance?
So we don't know who's doing the numbers, and we don't know who's publishing it.
But
the account, I think where the problem lies in the fact that there is no need for the government or the minister to publish analysis with projections.
Right.
So with the budget, there's always numbers that's given to us, but we don't really know why or how the numbers have been arrived, or what is the reason behind the increase in a particular revenue stream.
Well, actually, if it's 104%, the pack of cigarettes will be about 3,000 rupees, according to my calculation. 2,000 times, if you want to do it yourself, 1.47. Correct?
Yeah.
So it's 2,940. So smokers, here you go. Another. Okay, what's the third point?
So
what's the main concern?
The third concern is on the prior actions. So just to explain what prior actions are.
Right.
So as soon as Sri Lanka needs to get two levels of agreement on the IMF program. One is your staff level agreement, and then you have your board level agreement. In the time in between, Sri Lanka had to do certain commitments, and those are called prior actions. And some of the prior actions were increasing VAT, increasing personal income taxes to 36%. So a lot of tax increases that affects the working class and the general public. But during the same period of time, so we got our staff level agreement in September. In October, we passed a massive tax concession to HCL. So there are tax holidays for 12 years on corporate income tax and on value-added tax. So the question again is, why is it that why is it that it's considered optimal to increase taxation on personal income tax and VAT when we are giving tax holidays? Why wasn't no tax holidays a prior action or even a commitment in the first place? So I think these are 3 examples that highlight that we need to have published analysis that explains why the policy action is what's recommended, because that is what we can use to later on scrutinize or publicly argue. And that's also something that's if published, is easy to get social acceptance. So when taxes went up, there was a lot of social unrest. But if there was published analysis that supported it, then you could have avoided the social unrest to some extent. So that, I think, those are my 3 main concerns.
Main concerns, okay. Now then, how does the people hold the government accountable in terms of these commitments that they have agreed with the IMF?
Sure. I think, first of all, one thing is that the people need to know what did we agree with the IMF in the first place.
Yeah.
And to answer that, I think Verity Research launched, in collaboration with Mantri and Public Finance, we launched a platform called the IMF Tracker. It's an online platform that tracks around 100 commitments that Sri Lanka has made with the IMF. And that tells you the progress. So we update the IMF tracker every month. So as at end of April, Sri Lanka has completed 25% of the commitments. 9 of them were prior actions. And we have not met 2 commitments. One is getting the central bank approval of the central bank bill by Parliament. And that, I think, the debate is still being pushed. The second is increasing betting and gaming levies. So there is a bill published, but there is no amendment to the act. So those are 2 commitments that Sri Lanka ideally should have been done by end of April, which Sri Lanka has not yet met. In the month of May, the commitment that we need to meet is getting parliamentary approval on a welfare benefit scheme. We haven't really seen any developments yet, so we are yet to see if something comes to Parliament. So that's what's up for the month of May, and that's the overall progress in terms of the IMF commitment. So how people can hold the executives accountable is, like I said earlier, 50% of the time Sri Lanka was in an IMF program. So holding the government accountable and committed to ensure that we complete the IMF program is crucial. And that's why we have this IMF tracker, and when we don't meet a commitment, we highlight that on the tracker. We do a lot of public advocacy. So people are also aware that this is where Sri Lanka is lacking. And that is one way where people can always access, and it's an online platform, so it's always accessible in all 3 languages for people to take notes and hold the government accountable.
And what's the rationale, do you think, in your opinion, Raj, on the upping of the gaming levy?
So I think the betting and gaming levy is a constant concern, and it has not been revised, if I'm not mistaken, since 2014. There was a bill, there was a proposal in 2019, but it's never enacted. But the bigger problem with betting and gaming levies, and this has been highlighted in multiple COPEF reports, Committee of Public Finance reports, is that one of the components in the betting and gaming levy is something called the casino entrance levy. So that's a $50 per person tax, and that's part of the law. That's still part of the law. The problem is that it has never been collected. So even now with the IMF commitment, increasing it is great. Maybe we can increase revenue collection, but revenue collection on paper. But if in actuality we are not collecting existing taxation, there's a bigger problem in terms of ensuring that we actually collect existing taxation. So one way to prevent that is we make it a mandate where all non-collection of taxation is reported, is submitted as a report to the Ministry of Finance. Another example of non-collection is mansion taxes. In 2015, with the interim budget back then, there was an introduction of the mansion tax, and it was removed, I think, 2018-19 with the constitutional coup. But during that entire period, mansion taxes were never collected. It was never reported. So unless you go looking for it, you will never know that it was never collected. So I think the non-collection of taxation is a bigger problem that we need to tackle, and that's not been tackled with the IMF program, and maybe we need to tackle that with the government, where they report on all non-collection of taxation with adequate reasoning.
Thank you very much for that. We're in conversation with Raj Prabu, who is a senior research analyst at Verite. It's now time to take a look at the headlines from the Primetime News team. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
News First, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
Parliamentarian Vijitha Herath reveals a scam in importing crude oil to the country. Subject Minister Kanchana challenges Parliamentarian Vijitha Herath to lodge a complaint.
මෙතන බරපතල ගේම් එකක් ගිහිල්ලා තියෙනවා. ඒක ඇඩ්‍රස් එක හරි පැහැදිලිව තියෙනවා. මම අභියෝග කරනවා හෙට දවසේ පුළුවන් නම් ඔබතුමා පැමිණිල්ලක් දාන්න.
Minister of Justice Vijayadasa Rajpaksha's revelation on the events that unfolded on the 9th of May last year.
ඒ ලයිස්තුවේ හිටියේ මුලින්ම හිටියේ සජබේ මන්ත්‍රීතුමන්ලාගේ සහ දේශපාලන නායකින්ගේ ගෙවල්.
මම විශ්වාස කරනවා ඒක තුමා පෞද්ගලිකව කියන දෙයක් නෙමෙයි යම්කිසි බුද්ධි තොරතුරක් මත තමයි කියන්නේ කියලා.
State suppression over protests continue. Photojournalist Eranga Jayawardena nominated for the Pulitzer Prize. Sri Lanka to delay debate on central bank bill. Adverse weather reported from many parts of the island. Fishing communities advised not to venture into the Bay of Bengal. Pakistan former Premier Imran Khan arrested.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali on TV1.
And welcome back to Newsline Live. I'm in conversation with Mr. Raj Prabu from Verite. Raj, what do you say? Where is the focus of this whole IMF conditionalities and so on? Where's the focus going?
So I think currently when you look at the commitments per se, most of the commitments, at least 24 commitments are around taxation, increasing taxes and revenue consolidation. And as important as it is, because Sri Lanka is among the lowest in terms of tax to GDP in the world, and Sri Lanka hopes to increase its tax to GDP to 11% from its 8.3% in 2022 to 11.3% in 2023. Verite projects that even with all of these taxation measures, we are going to fall short by around the magnitude of 10% in our total revenue collection. But in addition to that, I think the focus of the IMF program should be a bit broader and also focus on governance. Because what research tells us is that when you look at countries that restructured since 1975, only 41% of the countries were able to do it in one shot. So in other words, 59% of the countries needed to restructure their debt more than once to ensure there's debt sustainability, they're out of the crisis. Another similar, and when you take that 59% and when you look at that, why did they have to do it? You see that one of the biggest reasons is poor governance. So the country, in terms of when you look at the governance indicators, there's something called the Worldwide Governance Indicators by the World Bank itself. And they assess governance on a scale of negative 2.5 to positive 2.5. And all of the countries that had to restructure more than once have poor governance according to that governance indicator. And what's interesting is Sri Lanka is also among that group.
But Raj, while I see the point, what you're saying about governance and so on, the immediate problem of a lack of dollars is not going to be resolved without a cohesive, comprehensive dollar earning strategy, surely. Sure.
So yes, you're right on that. And so the IMF program is I think, solely focused on social security, taxation. There are many areas that the IMF commitments are not focused on. Governance, one of it. Export orientation is also part of it. But as the program aims to fix structural imbalances, as that's one of the goals, fixing governance, without fixing governance is very hard to ensure sustainable economic recovery. You can ensure short-term economic recovery, but maybe 5 years down the line, we might enter into another crisis if governance is not given enough focus.
So, how will the IMF help us with this immediate concern for dollars? Because obviously the customs revenue is down. There's an import ban going on at the moment. And we need dollars. We need dollars to pay for raw materials. Production is down in the bigger companies where we are relying on imports and so on. The automobile industry is not heard of anymore. So how will this IMF program help us?
So the IMF program alone is going to do very little. So the IMF program is the first step in getting your in getting confidence. So one way is that, and we also see a lot of improvements in the dollar side. You see worker remittances going up slightly, tourism earnings coming in, but they're not sustainable or they're not long-term recovery strategies, and they're not something that Sri Lanka should be relying on. But I think it's more on Sri Lanka's part on what it does on how it can improve its dollar earning strategies. So I would rather put the onus or the responsibility in the hands of Sri Lanka, and say that the focus, and we can use the IMF program because it's a commitment. It's not conditionality where the IMF imposes conditions. It's something that Sri Lanka agrees upon as well. So Sri Lanka can come up with its own strategies, and we need to see a plan on how Sri Lanka hopes on increasing improving its dollar liquidities or even financial market liquidities as such.
Thank you very much for your questions. Thank you, Raj, for your answers. And let me tell you, and of course, as you know, you can send your questions to 0772 300 305. Harshan's put it on the screen. Here's one here. Shouldn't the Sri Lankan financial regulators deliberate on the pros and cons of introducing innovation in finance, such as digital currency, open finance, cryptocurrency exchanges, etc.? Does your research indicate a need for this?
So I think Veit hasn't really looked at that digital currencies into an extent, but taking it from the IMF perspective, the IMF, one of the commitments in the IMF is to do a banking sector review, understand the financial system and understand the financial structure as well. So hire independent assessors and understand the financial market. So once that report comes out, maybe we'll see what that report has to say and then have a conversation from there. But there is, I think, still time to meet that deadline. So once that report is out, I think we will be able to comment better on the financial market or the financial system in itself.
And your research, does it also indicate that there is an anomaly within the financial sector, and that is this, that the directors of banks have a 70-year-old limit, a 70-year upper limit, but the monetary board doesn't.
Okay.
So what are you going to do? Have a bunch of old fossils tell bank directors what to do? Does your indicate research these anomalies?
So I think where the banking sector mainly is, I think, currently focused on, they're more focused mainly on the domestic debt and the domestic debt restructuring. But these anomalies are, I wouldn't say the major concerns or aren't really of focus. And we haven't done a lot of research into it. I haven't read anything on it. But to speak of the banking system in itself, I think the bigger concern is on how domestic debt restructuring is and how that will affect the financial system. I think that's a bigger concern to the domestic banks currently. So I think they're more needed to know. There's more need for transparency on how the domestic debt restructuring is going to happen and what are the parameters on that.
In Sri Lanka, one matter is thought to have even changed governments, and it's been a perennial problem. Public debt management. And should public debt management, what does your research say? Should public debt management be in an independent unit separately, or should it be within the central bank?
I think creating a public debt management office is an IMF commitment. And I think that's really important because perennially we've mismanaged debt, we've let debt snowball and reaching unprecedented levels. So I think having a public debt management office that's independent, that focuses on debt reduction strategies and how to control debt. Because some time ago, I think in 2018-19, there was a medium-term debt reduction strategy that was announced, but it was never properly implemented. So having an independent public debt management office is crucial, and I think that's one of a good commitment in the IMF program if Sri Lanka meets the commitment.
And does your research also, Raj, Prabu from Verite, does your research also indicate various other anomalies? And one of those is, thank you for reminding me, is that there is an anomaly in that the governor and members of the Monetary Board and the Monetary Policy Board should be taxed similar to any other public servant.
So the taxation policy, I think there, of course, we haven't, again, done a lot of research on it, but the taxation of public servants is of concern. But The bigger concern is the whole of personal income tax is only going to collect 100 billion, like I said earlier. And there are a lot of other strategies where Sri Lanka can focus on increasing revenue that are more progressive.
Just where you're letting one lot get away.
But there is, that's true. But there are easier ways of collecting more revenue, and Sri Lanka should be focused on that as well.
But our constitution speaks of equality.
Of equality, yes. So I think in that aspect you can say you have to tax everyone equally. But when Sri Lanka is already in the lowest in terms of revenue collection, Sri Lanka should focus on easy fixes, low-hanging fruits that can collect a lot more revenue.
It appears to me that the low-hanging fruit tends to impact on the people more than anyone else or any other group. And the people surely are the biggest group.
So, for example, withholding tax would affect the rich, and tobacco taxation would affect vested interest or the tobacco corporations. Those are easy fixes focused on highly earning people and not actually working class. So, like maybe instead of increasing VAT, you could have focused on increasing withholding tax.
True.
So that's
I think the point, of course, that our viewers are raising is that then taxation must be equal. Why should why should the central bankers be treated separately? And indeed, as this other message says, the alleged bond scam, would never happened without the connivance and knowledge of those at the central bank. Point taken. Thank you. Where do you think? Do you think we might make our second tranche from the IMF? What about the third?
So the second tranche ideally would happen in September.
Right.
So we might be able to make that, but the third tranche or towards the year end would mean that we'll have to meet revenue targets and also have made significant progress on debt restructuring and many other negotiations. As of now, we're already 5 months in. We don't see a lot of progress on it, and the basic math says that on revenue we'll fall short by around 10%. So unless we make immediate fixes to those, it's highly likely that we're increasing the probability of the IMF program failing as well. But I don't think it's too late. So we can ensure that we get the third tranche if we made those immediate fixes to ensure that we meet the commitments made by the IMF.
What's your research indicating about the ease of doing business in Sri Lanka?
So I think in terms of ease of doing business, it's on investor confidence. So investor confidence, one way of assessing it is looking at credit ratings. So if your so currently Sri Lanka's credit ratings at RD levels, basically at default. And we need to focus on improving credit ratings, and one way of improving credit ratings is improving governance. So we've seen that when governance improves, your credit ratings also improve, and that's a straightforward indication that there's better governance. There's the sector in itself, Sri Lanka in itself, is performing better, and I think that will encourage investors to bring their dollars in.
Thank you very much for your questions. As I said, are taxes collected systematically, or are there loopholes in the system where big businessmen default in paying their taxes?
I think one example for that is the casino entrance levy that's still not collected, and also tobacco taxation. Perennially, we've been undertaxing tobacco industries. So a lot of vested interest comes into play in these taxation policies, and the people have to pay the price because people have to pay high personal income taxes, people have to pay VAT affects everybody, and inflation. So there are certain loopholes that needs to be addressed, and those are taxation, and those are some of it that are highlighted. But there are further issues as well in terms of tax
We've got
collection.
about a minute, and I'll quickly ask you this. Mr. Raj, if we have gone 16 times to the IMF and still we keep repeating the performance, what guarantees are there that we will not fail again?
As of now, there are still no guarantees, but that's where we have, for example, the IMF tracker in place to hold the government accountable and committed to the completion of the program. When earlier we see that when as soon as we see some sign of recovery, what the government tends to do is we tend to fail on commitments and we tend to fail on the IMF program. But creating transparency on the commitments and holding the governments accountable almost every month, I think we can ensure some sort of accountability from the governments, and also to ensure that they meet the commitments. And that way there is some sort of guarantee that Sri Lanka ensures some sort of success out of the
Thank you very much, Raj Prabu from Verite, for your time on our program.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And that's the way it was tonight on Newsline Live with Raj Prabu from Verite. Take care, have a great evening as much as you can, and as always, God bless you all.